Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Race and Lanes podcast. Once again, we ride again. We're back in the big seat. A couple of weeks off, a little hiatus. Um, we were trying to have a couple of shows in the kitty for you guys. Some of them worked out good. Some of them maybe not so much. But we're back live and in person in living color tonight. And as always, we need you guys to do us a huge big favor. Do us a nice one and hit that subscribe button, hit the bell icon so you get notifications when we do get ready to go live. If you have questions for us tonight, we are going to be talking insurance tonight. We have our resident insurance expert up and on board with us, Mr. Tommy Ruke. So if you got questions, anything pertaining to insurance, drop them down in the chat, and we will definitely do our best to try to weave those into the conversation. I'm trying to make sure I got all my things going. I think I touched on everything that we need you guys to do. If you would help us out, hit that subscribe button. That helps us out, helps us get into a bigger algorithm out into the YouTube world and gets the show out to a broader audience. So please, by all means, hit the like, share, and subscribe button. And also, just send us a comment if you got a question or if you got a question, comments, or concerns. Drop them in the comment section, and we'll definitely make sure that we try to read them and get back to you on those. With that being said, let me welcome in our my whirlwind co-host back from his whirlwind tour, Mr. Chuck Snow. Good evening, Chuck. How are you?
Well, we're doing great. You know what? I'm glad to be home. Came home to some weird news yesterday that I got it from one of my former drivers. He sent me a clip, which I want Tommy to hear this one. Welcome Tommy on. Then I got to tell you guys this story. It's sometimes fact is stranger than fiction.
Yeah.
Tommy, are
Let's
you
see.
there?
Let's see.
Go ahead,
There
Chuck.
he is.
There I
Professional
am.
truck
Okay.
insurance. Tommy Ruke, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you, sir.
So glad to have you aboard. Hey, guys, I got to share this one with you. One of my old drivers sent me something yesterday. I couldn't believe what I was reading. There's a transport company up in Quebec, Canada. I know who they are. I've met the owner. This is the company that everybody wants to be like because they're so progressive. They do everything right. These guys were looking at fuel mileage 25 years ago. Specing trucks with fairings and automatic transmissions and all sorts of stuff. They're certainly early adapters. They had a driver get caught in Pennsylvania for drinking. I believe she was 2 or 3 times over the accepted alcohol, which is really 0, but the points, I think it's 0.08 in Pennsylvania, the jurisdiction she was caught. She's based out of Quebec.
0.02 for CDL.
Yeah. And anyways, she got fired. The government of Quebec made them reinstate her because she should have gone for help. Have you guys ever heard of anything so crazy? And on top of that, it is a union company and they have a union contract that both sides agree. Somebody drinks, they're gone. And the province of Quebec said no, they had to reinstate her. Have you ever heard of anything so ridiculous in your entire lives?
Yeah, that's a weird one.
I have heard some stuff because I've dealt with employee practice liability, and this is where this is, and EOC, Equal Opportunity Communities in Florida, is that same kind of a situation. The problem is they had to rehire her, but not as a driver. She's not qualified for a driver. They would have to give her some other kind of position in there, and that's how big they are. That would come up the same here if she had asked for help. This is protection of the alcoholism can be in that they protected by the American Disabilities Act, Chuck. Here, so
Okay.
I've had some. You got a few messengers up there. Yes, I have. Sadly enough. So, but they would not hire. They could not hire as a driver. They would have to make reasonable accommodations for her, and it depends on how big they are and how reasonable they are. And a smaller motor carrier would not have to do that because it would not be reasonable for them if they have no other piece of employment. But they would have to put her in dispatch or shop or something like that, Chuck.
Okay. I just thought it was, I think it's personally, I thought it was a slap in the face for the endeavors that all of us have done in the truck industry to make it a safer environment.
You're absolutely right on that part of it, and that's what you have disturbed in it. And I don't know, being a female and being alcohol, I don't know if she had reached out and said I had a problem or something like that. You follow what I'm saying? We don't know all the
Beforehand.
background in it.
Beforehand, I think that's the only time I know if you say something that you have a problem before a test or something like that comes up. I thought that they have to be that's kind of the only way they'll show you any mercy. But I thought that after the fact, you get the full weight of whatever's coming behind that.
Yeah, but she'll lose her CDL, so she can't drive. So their counter would be we have no other position to pay her. There would be a reasonable accommodation. That would be the counterpart, the defense. Obviously, if they had to reinstate her, they failed on that with that defense because they're so big, so large.
But I was thinking that because trucking is such a safety sensitive industry, everything is about safety. And Tommy, you and I were out there in the old days, when things weren't as strict. Rico, I don't know if you remember a time before drug testing and stuff like that, when there was a problem with drug abuse and alcoholism in the trucking industry.
I've heard the story. I've heard the war stories. I haven't necessarily. I can't say. Let's see. I started trucking back in. I started trucking back in 2003.
Oh yeah, the drug testing was already in.
Yeah.
Zero tolerance to alcohol was. That was it. Just zero, which I think is great. But we had problems in Canada, especially, and I know those problems in the U.S. As well with drivers drinking, and it's intolerable.
It's the bennies though that were keeping them awake, Chuck, because there were no hours of service enforcement back in those days either. I mean, my father tried to turn around from Florida to New York City like in 24 hours or some ridiculous time frame like that. I remember those.
It became a badge of honor how far you could push yourself.
And this, Rico, this was before the interstate system. This is when all this transportation was off on this rural roads, 2 and 4 lane highways.
Huh.
Yeah. Excuse me. The interstate system was only totally completed about 35 years ago.
Right. And that was the demise of cab overs, by the way, Rico.
Yeah, I remember. Like I say, I remember. I think one of the things that kind of really helped. And we don't have those nostalgic movies like that nowadays and stuff like that. But it was of course, Smokey and the Bandit. That was one thing that got enamored. And then there was a TV show that was on air, BJ and the Bear. That's one of the things that, and he drove that old Kenworth cab over. So
the good thing about those movies is that it did get young guys and girls interested in trucking.
Right. It definitely. I mean, that was one of my fascinations as a small little boy coming up. Seeing those movies and seeing how and just seeing the truck itself. And then if I had a neighbor that happened to be a truck driver, and my best friend that stayed across the street, and every now and again when he'd come home in his old cab over, he'd throw us up in there and we'd ride around the block or two. I mean, it was just the coolest thing in the world. So that's where I guess I got bit with the diesel bug at that point in
time. Rico, I don't know if I shared this with you before, but there were 2 things that we did in those days that's absolutely crazy. First off, we took the front brakes off the front axles because we didn't want a black jackknife and from the weight. And we ordered trucks in Florida without heaters. I didn't have a heater in my car when I was in high school. When we had to put heaters in, it's when the government required defrosters. And you can't have any frost without a heater. But I had the delivery trucks here. We took the heaters out of them. We didn't sell heaters.
Man.
Well, I remember the trucks having front wheel brake eliminators where you would just pull a switch, take the front brakes off the front axle, because the word of the day was that you don't want brakes on that front axle if it's wet out, because you'll jackknife.
Yeah, talk to jackknife. And now you're going to have the automatic adjustment brakes, tractor and trailers now will be mandated. There was one thing I heard today is that FMCSA is looking to mandate the crash avoidance equipment. And today was the last day you could put input on those things. That's a mixed feeling on this accident avoidance equipment. Some of it we're hearing that it'll react when there's a shadow on the bridge and stuff like that. Maybe some of your audience has good or bad experience in it, but the people within it and the lane, keeping the truck in the lane and all that, has eased people, make it more of assistance to the driver. And I'm an advocate to that part of it, but it's got to be the right. I don't know if it's old equipment that's getting false images or something like that.
Yeah, good point.
Tommy, we were talking before the show. We was talking about what we wanted to discuss tonight, and you were saying that you wanted to tell us about what's coming down the pike with safety ratings and things of that nature that's getting ready to come down the pike. And when you said that, I didn't get a chance to respond at the time because we were running a little bit behind trying to get ready to come on the air. But one thing that I have noticed in the past 2 to 3 weeks, just my anecdotal experience and something that I've noticed is that I know that brake check was one of those weeks, and the enhanced enforcement and all that stuff was kicking in. But I have really noticed, especially I was in my personal vehicle today, and I was coming back and forth from North Carolina back down to Georgia, and on the way up to North Carolina the other day and on Monday and coming back down today, I just noticed an exorbitant amount of DOT officers performing inspections. I mean, an exorbitant amount. For all the way from Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina, like I've seen, like they had a mandate that they got to get out there and inspect some trucks. So I'm not sure if that may have anything, if one thing has anything to do with the other, with the inspections that you were talking about, with the safety ratings that are coming out. I'm not sure if one thing has anything to do with the other, but that was just something that I really noticed, a really enhanced presence along the highways.
No, Rico, because this hasn't got down that level. And one thing surprised me is that the fatality rates are down fractionally, not a whole lot. Where over their last 3 or 4 years they were up but they've leveled off and gone down a little bit. But there's an emphasis on safety. Make the highway safety, Chuck. Rico, and the only way you can do that is enforce the laws. And so I think there is some emphasis about that. The thing that we brought up that your audience needs to understand is that the rules are changing, some of it favorably. The new CSA is going to be very favorable to the trucker who's doing it right and has 1 or 2 small problems, because they're not going to have the severity anymore. You're just going to have an event, 1 or 2, if you have a violation. They're getting rid of, there's 900 some odd violations now. They're going to get down to 141 violations here. And This is where and it's for the scores. They'll still get them, but not against the scores. And this is because the officers were stacking them on top of each other, running up the scores. Like load security might be low security and the chain's bad and it's put on the wrong place. Hazmat's gone from like 450 down to 14, where you have the placard and then you don't have the right packages. So they're not going to chunk. If you get one, period, speeding, 14, 15, whatever, you get that.
Supposed to be simplified.
Just one, simplified. The 2 major things going to affect your drivers more often, meaning alcohol, you mentioned, that's now going to be unsafe driving.
Okay.
if they get caught, which is what there should be alcohol on the road. Most of the alcohol violations are doing on the audits we talked about earlier for the satisfactory, unsatisfactory, conditional audits. That's where most of them, because the drug violations currently are they didn't do the
Pre-employment.
pre-hire drug,
Right.
pre-on-board drug. They didn't do the random drug test. They didn't do those kind of things, which had nothing to do if the driver failed or not. So they're saying now they're going to get they're going to shift that drug stuff to unfit at audit time here, because they
Now,
put the
does that
driver behind them.
excuse me, does that unfit include if they're not, because I know there's some small carriers that were not doing the pre-employment drug testing for their people. Is that going to include that?
Yeah, that would make them unfit if they have to do that part
Okay,
and be a violation. Right, and that
it
part will
should.
be, but that part will be there. The one major thing is the DVIR, the driver vehicle inspection report. That's now going to be, if the officers find something that the driver should have found when he or she did the DVIR, that's now going against the driver. So they're separating maintenance into two categories: one, driver observation, and one, maintenance that the motor carrier is responsible for. Now that's going to follow that driver on their PSA. And it's also going to show the insurance companies and other people that trucker is not enforcing the rules to inspect the trucks on the DVIRs, because they're not controlling the drivers. Those
So
are the two.
so for the small guy, that's the chief cook and the bottle washer, the driver and the carrier. That's still a double whammy for them.
Right, is that, but it's going to, it's the government did a kind of backdoor. A DVR does not have to be recorded unless they found something wrong.
Right.
It's a misnomer. They still got to do it, but they don't have to keep a paper record of it unless they found something wrong. Well, they couldn't. Now there's a means to see if they found something wrong and
Right.
should have done it. So this is what they're trying to, and instead of being able to audit the DVIRs on an audit or something, or ask for it, they don't do that. But they're now saying, did they find something or not, and should have kept a record of it. So that's going to be the big thing. But the other thing is the audits you talk about, Chuck, where they come in and do an audit, satisfactory, unsatisfactory, conditional.
Right.
And you might, it'd be interesting for your audience, how many of those have ever been audited? If so, what size unit they have, and, have they ever had a conditional audit part of it? Because it's just so many, it's just so inefficient. There's no audits here. And the reason there's no audits, Chuck, and this is the good part about it, it's just there's no record of it. They quit looking at comprehensive audits, the compliance audits, and they went to focus audits, meaning they see your truck run down a highway and you have an hour service problem. They come in and only look at the hour service problem. They don't look at maintenance. They don't look at driver fitness, driver qualification file, just hour of service. But that doesn't lead to a rating, because the focus. So the audits they're doing are more focused on where the problems are versus taking 4 days to see everything. So, but there's no way to say now are they fit or not. And this is our friend Hank, the brokers and shippers industry want some safe harbor. They want something that they can say that if I give that trucker a load, I've done what I had. So there is a drop down on the website that Hank put in, and it came in March after the CSA 2010 became effective in December, that says this is not a safety rating unless they've been put out of service by the FMCSA. They can operate the U.S. highways. They hope that would be the safe harbor, but it hasn't held up in court. So they're trying to come up with some measurement. If you give a load to a trucker that's fit, this is the theory, then we're safe. And that makes some sense. How does a shipper know or a broker know? And the dilemma they have is, if you dig too deep into it, then you got a problem because you don't know it. And this is your business, and so now, and this is who's trying to push it.
Yeah, and you know what? There are a lot of shippers out there, smaller shippers, that think it's smart to run around with blinders on.
Right.
But they are, if they pick a bad carrier and that carrier messes up with their load, they could be held.
Right. And this is the part. One thing, this reminds me of the hot thing, Chuck, you and I talk about. Rico, they're stealing identity. This is becoming really serious. This double brokerage, but stealing identity. I shared this with Chuck, and he had someone that came in the same thing. They're stealing somebody's DOT number, and they're getting inspected on that DOT number. And this person now has alerts and this kind of stuff and can't get loads. But FMCA will not let them get a new DOT number because that'd be a new venture. Even though the insurance company's willing to write them, the insurance company's bringing to attention here, and there's just no way to follow it. So your trucker's got to come up with some way to find out and the only way you can do that is hook up one of these services. And we have Carrier Software, you've met our people, Chuck, are friends of ours and members of our foundation. They'll check every inspection a DOT number has. And that's why the smaller motor carriers have to start checking that. And the minute they see one that's not there, is the data queue it and put notice on that part of it. And they're just going to have to start checking. And a part of that's economically now too, because now they'll steal the money also. And that's that double brokerage phenomena. And the government is looking at trying to control that.
It's anytime.
It's gotten really bad.
Yeah, it's gotten worse. It's almost an epidemic right now. It's just like the crooks have found out about about how to do this, and they're doing very well at it. And then to make matters worse, you've had layoffs on the logistics side all over. So you've got people out there without work that were making a lot of money, and their lifestyles reflect how much they were making, past tense. And I would imagine some of these people are involved in some of this.
Never thought about that, Chuck, but they know how to do that part of it. And
I was listening to Freight Waves last week, and I think on Thursday or Friday, and they were saying the number of people being laid off, and a lot of them from the tech side of things.
Right. Not the sales rep.
They would have firsthand experience where the weak spots are in our industry.
And the first thing, just if your listeners say, they should never accept a load from a broker without making sure they have a brokerage authority. Period. At 100%. least there's a bond there to safeguard them in case they don't get paid.
Make sure that the phone numbers line up, the email addresses line up. When some brokers said, "Yeah, I'm with whoever," I'm with C.H. Robinson, and then tells you, "Well, you'll get it from my personal email because we're having problems today in Eden Prairie or whatever, or at our Chicago. I'll send it on my personal because we got to get this load covered." I can tell you that organizations like C.H. Robinson, not in a million years would let their own president or vice president or CEO be sending business stuff out on his own personal email. That's
right.
Just no.
And what they're doing is this is C.H. Roberts and not Robinson. They changed. No, I'm serious. I mean, maybe not them because they're too low profile, but they take one that is legitimate and twist one of the names around, River instead of Rivers or something like that. So they think it's the right one. And they don't check, and they actually ask for their ID number. And you're right; they need to come back and call them and verify the order that they just received from the phone number that they found on the FMCA's website.
And Tom, another thing I want to add, and this is for our carriers and brokers that listen: talk to your shippers, talk to your receivers. Make sure that there is a number, some sort of a transaction number that is given to everybody, that everybody shares, so that when a driver pulls into whether it's a produce shed or it's a warehouse that's loading appliances, he asks for order number ABS 43112, and the shipper checks that and make sure that that's the right carrier for the right load.
That's a dilemma we have, because now they happen, and you know what happens, they see somebody takes a road board, they go and beat the trucker there and say, this is the one I took off the road board, this is what you're talking about in this case, and they give them the load. And then they turn the claim in where load gets stolen to the trucker who originally got their load from. And now, you know, their insurance company says, no, it's not covered because you gave it to the wrong trucker. Yet now that trucker, now the broker says, well, you didn't pay for it, trucker, so I'm going to take all the money I owe you. And I mean, this is what's, and insurance, we're going to talk something about fraud like this in the conference next month. It starts 4 weeks from this weekend, or this coming weekend. But this is happening all the time, and there's just, you know, technology is great, but it's also leading to so much scam or so much things like this.
Well, because Tom, our industry is created by and for honest people, and we all trust each other. We always did, and now all of a sudden we've got fraudsters in there. There was always the odd one once in a while. We all know who they are or were, but not like this. This seems to be an epidemic when I'm talking to people.
Well, I remember those blue book and red
really
book
huge problem.
Where the brokers got a financial rating. You remember those books, and you could look in financial ratings up.
The blue book, and then sure.
And one thing that you can do, you know, just my opinion, and one of the things that I talk about, we talk about it here on the show, is if you're running if you have a consistent area that you're servicing, and you start to understand and know the people that you're dealing with on that lane, and that way that'll kind of help insulate you a little bit, because if you're dealing with the same people on a return basis over and over again, that kind of helps cut down on some of the riffraff and being out here kind of exposed to just the whims of different brokers or whatever that you happen to be dealing with out there on the spot market.
Chuck, Rico, I agree with that, but with the shortage of loads, and this is something too that you tell us how you impression, because you talk to the audience better than I do, but there's a lot of doomsayers out there with the fuel cost up and the freight rates are down. I mean, we were on your show, what, a year and a half ago, when you had the highest freight rates ever?
Right.
And the trucks, people bought trucks at over trucks,
right?
And now they're 40% less than what they paid for them. And they're getting 40% less per mile. Yep. And so, and they're desperate now. If they have continued contracts, Rico, like you suggest, and some marketplace like food deliveries and all that, it's not quite as bad. But that's the problem you got. They're there's desperation for loads, so therefore they just take anything to cover their payments.
Well,
and this,
you know what?
Well, that's part of the problem. That's part of the problem, Tommy. Is that the problem is you have to kind of just stay in your niche, and if it's going to take some time. It's not something that happens overnight. You got to stay in that niche, and you got to stay in that lane in order for you to be able to develop that. You got to kind of stay there and work it. You got to kind of work the plan, so to speak. And it takes a lot of discipline. It takes a lot of you really just have to stick to it, because some days, you know, I'm fortunate enough to have a situation where I make enough money on my head haul to where I can come back empty, and it won't. I'm not going to say it won't affect me, because now with the price of fuel, I'm definitely I started to feel it. So, you know, I'm like leaving money on the table. So if I'm going to be dealing on my lane, I'm only going to deal with reputable people, and I'm going to try to stick with those reputable people at all times. I'm not going to try to go out and I see somebody else that has a load that looks very attractive to me, but I've never dealt with them and I never heard of them, and it's just a new kid on the block, so to speak. I'm going to be twice as leery on dealing with something like that as I would with someone like a Alan Lund or somebody like that. Just one.
But you know what, Rico? In fairness to you, when we were talking like a year and a half ago, and the freight rates were 10 and 12 and whatever they were a mile, You kept saying, no, I'm just sticking to my lane. I have my deal. I don't want to mess it up. This isn't going to last forever. And we both agreed on that. And you did.
Exactly.
You stuck in your lane. You ran from Georgia to North Carolina like you always did. Didn't hose your customer. You never once took advantage of them. They realize that you're not a carrier, you're a partner.
And that pays off because, like I say, and even when I'm dealing with now, I'm out recruiting new people, new brokers to work with, coming back down out of North Carolina. I let them know, look, I'm not going to be your cheapest. I'm not going to be the cheapest option. I'm not going to get into the whole deal of, they say, well, the classic saying, I don't have that much in the load or whatever. Well, I'm not your guy. What I am is I'm here to be someone that you can depend on, someone that says what they're gonna do and does what they say. That's not out here just trying to be transactional. I'm trying to build a relationship. I'm not trying to be a transactional carrier. I'm not trying to be a transactional situation.
You can't.
I want a relationship, and I want us to be able to be a mutually beneficial situation for both of us, not just one of us.
Rico, can I bring another problem up with this problem? And the problem
Sure.
from the insurance standpoint of that is the value of the cargo, because those brokers don't know what the value of that cargo is. What cargo limits do you carry?
Cargo limits, I'm at 100,000.
It ain't enough. Today's marketplace. And you're still, if that's all the customer requires, you're still responsible for the full load. Carmack makes you responsible for the full load. Canadians don't. Canadians, you have this. And so you sign some contract with a broker, what they say, if it doesn't get paid, we can deduct everything that we owe you for past trips out of the settlement and put them out of business. I got a smoke trucker down out west that's actually happened in that area when the cargo carrier didn't pay, and they had factored a load, and now the factoring company's coming back for them the money that they didn't receive from the trucking company. I mean, from the broker, and the broker denied it because the payment, because they didn't pay for the cargo. But
so what's a decent cargo limit nowadays, Tommy?
Well, I don't know what you're hauling, but lumber is over $100,000 a load of lumber today. Yes, that's what I know. I would guess you need probably $250,000 in cargo insurance.
I would be scared of anything less than 250 just for the common goods stuff. Rico. And by the way, it's not that much more money. 10-15% more premium.
Yeah, that's not where the cost is with insurance. It's in the liability side of things.
Well, and also the first dollars, but the first dollar of anything. But this is the real problem that they need. Every trucker needs to find out. Ask the broker, how much is that load worth? Ask the shipper, how much is that load worth? Because there's two things: what it's worth, and the insurance companies they require. Shippers typically know what it's worth, and when you deal directly with a shipper like you do, Rico, they tell you the limits that they want you to have because they know what it's worth. But when you get it from a broker, they have no idea. I mean, seafood, there's a difference in fish, live fish or sailfish. It's all seafood, and all the broker knows is seafood.
Right.
And there's a lot of exclusions on that, isn't there?
Yes. Like the one I talk about. All right, Rico.
Yes, sir.
Would you consider a load of microwave parts being a that would be electronic?
You say microwave?
No, microwaves, would be excluded as electronics.
I would think that it is an electronic.
Well, most people wouldn't, because electronics are TVs and things like that. You don't think microwaves are from the term electronics, because that's a theft item. This truck burned up, had nothing to do with theft. Part of it. And they had a exclusion for electronics, so they got to find out.
Are there some exclusions that are? I know that every policy does have them, but are there some that are pretty broad stroked that our listeners can make note of, perhaps, that are? I know years ago it was electronics. tires, precious metals like gold and silver.
Copper.
Is that okay?
Copper gets
For
the
good
precious
reason.
metal. Chuck, the answer to that question is like the one that's asking. If it's something like electronics, and what's electronics today? I think electronics, a cell phone or TV, but as a microwave electronic, is a refrigerator. They all have chips in it today. And
So would that make hold on a second. So does that make a fridge an appliance or an electronic?
Well, if a microwave is electronic, why isn't a refrigerator?
I would think anything that plugs in is an electronic. That's what I would think.
But the electronics exclusion, most of them are for TVs and things of high value. Yet, when something like this happens, unfortunately, this insurance company, my first rule, Chuck, is this. Anything beyond will cover your legal liability is bad. The longer the more pages you have, the worse the policy is, period.
Okay.
Cargo policies should be 4 or 5 pages long. 6 at the most,
Man.
depending on some special endorsements you might want to add for again, electronics or mechanical breakdown. If they're hauling any food goods, obviously they got to be real careful not to have any spoilage or temperature change exclusion.
Right.
And there's markets out there that don't have those things. You don't buy the cheapest one. You buy one that covers what your needs are. Because Chuck, I think they have a greater chance of being put out of business for not having the right cargo policy than having a crash.
Oh, I agree.
I think that everybody tonight should definitely make sure you go pull up your full policy and kind of go through that thing and read that to understand what you got to deal with there. If you need to make changes, you get on the phone first thing tomorrow and get a hold of your agent, because I'm definitely going to be looking at mine.
Call the agent. There's not a right policy or wrong policy, Rico. It's just, does it meet your needs? They need to call the agent and say, I'm hauling these things. Does my policy cover those things?
Yep. Tom, I remember when trucks were going up in value, and you had said to our listeners, whatever you do, go and get your truck appraised. Your $80,000 Freightliner may be worth $130,000 right now.
Right.
So along with that, we've had inflation. Is it a real good idea for our listeners to go and look at their cargo policies and make sure that their cargo policies are matching the inflated number of goods, that pertain to goods alone, just the goods they have been hauling that maybe were worth $75,000 a load. Maybe they're worth 125 now.
Absolutely. That's the point I'm making. Everything's up 25, 30%. This part of it.
At the same time, should they go to their agent and should they get a truck appraisal, and should they get the value of their truck reappraised, because now all of a sudden they may have been paying extra for for a truck that they thought was worth 130,000. Now it's only worth 60.
They're going to have a tough time doing that in insurance. The insurance carrier is not going to want to redo it, but they need to make sure they take care of that at renewal time.
Okay, but they were doing it the other way, right? When you called the agent and said, "Now my truck's worth 130," and charging you the extra, correct?
Right. For 1 truck, 2 truck, they can try that, Chuck, that part of it, but that's not common to do. Most insurance companies do not want to do that part of it. But you're absolutely right. They need to praise both of them. But my concern again is this cargo is just going wow. And Rico, again, I don't want to know your business and all. What do you haul?
Produce. That's why I need to look. I need to get them across produce.
A load of watermelon is worth more than $100,000, particularly particularly that part of it, my friend. I mean, that's and does your policy have a temperature change exclusion on it?
Yeah, I got reefer breakdown.
You have to prove do you have your trailer that has technology on it that shows you the temperature, running temperature, and that can give
Yes.
you a warning when it's not the right temperature?
Yes.
Okay, that mechanical. There are policies that don't have a temperature exclusion in them or a spoilage exclusion, and those
Yes.
are preferred for produce because now depends on the type of produce. You know about the Food Safety Modernization Act, I'm sure.
Of
Absolutely.
course, yeah. Hank's been on here a
Okay,
dozen times talking about it.
right, and that's really, that's the hang up I have here. Again, my father, as Chuck knows, haul produce at least one way as a flower, so we were well aware of that. But that's what you got to worry about. Have you been to a supermarket? I mean, you just need to ask the farmer or the broker you're getting your loads from, what are these worth now?
Right. Right. Yeah. It's a big mix. It's mixed produce. So I have a little bit of everything from lettuce to strawberries. I cover the gamut.
Well, yeah, strawberry, and that's the problem with fresh. These FSMA, Food Safety Modernization Act. If they say a little fuzz on that cargo on that strawberry, they might reject the
Right.
whole load.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that
And then
happens.
you got to ask your insured if they reject the whole load. Your insured, your agent, they reject the whole load. And by the way, I forget. I know your agent. I got to be careful. I'm not.
Guys, I got a problem with that.
Bob's not gonna be happy with me on this part of it. Anyway, but you need to ask him about that part of it, because if the whole load gets rejected, now you can't sell it or get rid of it or until you get somebody to sign off of it.
Right.
And how you prove that it was adulterated when it wasn't destroyed, because policy says we have to destroy. So that's the gray act, and what you're hauling is something I would be extremely nervous with 100,000, Rico, for food.
Yeah, I'm making a phone call first thing tomorrow when they open up. We're gonna have us a little sit down tomorrow.
On that part, the rest of it you're okay. You got reefer breakdown and all, but I guess that's the one lesson we learned today
Absolutely.
for everybody about that.
And that's why these conversations are so invaluable, because for us average truckers or people that small fleets and things of that nature, where do we find this information? How do we avail ourselves to this information? We think that we're doing the best we can by just, okay, this is what they say, this is what we are required to carry, so this should be good enough. So when we don't have anyone of expertise to come in and really demystify this thing and break it down to us laymen, to really for us to understand, we are really walking around with our heads stuck up our rear ends.
You're right. And you know what? Ignorance is ignorance of the law or ignorance of your policy. It doesn't work.
No.
And our suggestion is to have a tariff and say you're shipping under your tariff, and all we're responsible for is how much you tell us the insurance limit you require. Or I even say get a stamp and say that for unknown. Now the customers that you deal with all the time on your dedicated routes, Rico, you just need to ask the customer, how much is this load worth? I mean, let them, you're okay with that. They're not going to require you to tell you something that's not truthful, or just tell them that you ever give me a load worth more than this, let me know.
Right.
Something like that, so you can push back on that part of it, Rico. That's what I suggest there. But the broker, and then the broker's got another trick. I'll say, oh, don't worry about it. We got excess coverage. But you don't realize that excess coverage has a right to go back and subrogate back against the insured if they ever have to pay. The customer might be happy, but the insurance company that writes that excess for that broker is then going against our insured to collect what wasn't paid.
Well, I don't know if you can answer this question, but if a small carrier sends their broker customer a letter saying, listen, you're insured, our insurance covers 100,000 or whatever it is, 200,000. If you have anything larger, please notify us in writing immediately so we can put a rider on it. Otherwise, we're not insured. Does that take the small carrier off the hook for liability?
It helps. That's a little more complicated. I'd rather do the other way. Says, and you're saying the same thing. Make sure you don't give me a load that's worth more than this when you send a certificate. That communication.
But this way, you
Because
put it in writing. I
right,
know that having dealt with insurance companies
right,
for my whole adult life, I know that they'll, that they, at the end of the day, they always go, "That's nice, Chuck. Is it in writing?"
right. Do that part when they send a certificate. Just put in a certificate that email. Here's my certificate, and all you require is 100,000. Don't give me a load worth more than 100,000,
Okay.
or tell me
And
if it's worth more than that.
the onus would be on them if they did.
The argument back is because the technical part of a release bill of lading, which is what Canada uses, moving and
Yep.
storage uses, airline, is that you only can be responsible so much value for that price. So if you
Yes.
accept the load with that wording, then you say, because if it would be worth more than that, then I would charge you more. You could back. It's not as good as having a tariff and a release bill of lading that's formal, but at least there's
Right.
an argument there.
Okay.
But your
For our
insurance companies,
listener,
but the problem you're going to have is your insurance company's only going to pay 100,000. So now you're arguing that, and if that broker's holding your money up while
they
you're
should.
arguing this, and your insurance company doesn't have a duty to defend, just an option to defend or no duty to defend, you're out too. But that's better than nothing, Chuck. And it gets
This
back to
was
Rico.
this was something. This is It's funny that this whole conversation came up. And Chuck, I want your input on this because everybody now is talking about how difficult it is to get they're complaining about the rates, complaining about how much the rates are. And I think that this is an integral question that you could weave into a negotiation to talk about getting a better rate as well. Because, like you said, Tommy, does the broker know what the load is worth? Like when you're negotiating, when you're talking with the broker about a load, you're trying to get a load. You get that type of information. And okay, if you have to go and bump your insurance up, or if you've already, say for instance, in my case, I'm going to make the phone call tomorrow to possibly go ahead and bump my cargo coverage up. That seems like that might be a compelling piece of a negotiating piece that you could weave into a conversation to help out with getting to maybe get a more favorable rate in your favor. What do you think, Chuck?
Well, maybe. Here's the issue. In some of the large brokerage companies, the carrier salespeople or their assistants have no idea what the commodity is. And it's being shipped at an ABC warehouse in Atlanta, Georgia, and it's going to a food liner or whoever up in Raleigh, North Carolina, and they don't have a clue what it is. Somebody has put on their FAK, which I hate that term, or produce. Well, what is it for produce? Is it strawberries or is it watermelon? But sometimes, and I've had this, Rico, I sat on both sides of the desk,
right,
and behind the wheel. So I have had this. I've had these arguments with brokers. What are we picking up? Well, it's a skidded load of what? I remember one night, one of our guys I flipped. One of our guys picked up a load of truck engines at a Caterpillar plant in Illinois. And he got the load, and if I am not mistaken, it was Cat Logistics. It was the Caterpillar had their own logistics gig set up many years ago, and driver loaded it, and he said what they did for securement. Now this goes back a while ago. What they did for securement was they had given him access to a hammer, nails, and a bunch of boards. And I'm not exaggerating, guys.
I know it. I know it. That's
And the
why
guy went around a corner too fast, and these engines are heavy, and they all swung the other way, and the truck went off the road, and it cost us a fortune. Now, my stupid dispatcher accepted the load at the time, saying that we would be responsible for securement.
Mm.
Okay,
And Chuck, that
stuff
reminds
like
me,
that.
Rico, that reminds me of another thing. Anytime they get a load and cannot see them being loaded and look at seeing it's loaded and it's already sealed, make sure they write on the receipt, shipper load and count.
Yeah. That'll
Which
start a
means,
war sometimes, Tommy, in the shipping office, because I've been involved with it, and
but
it can get
but
hot.
Chuck,
You're
you're
right.
right. You got to do it because and
You-
to take a picture of the sealed.
Yes. And there's more and more places now will not allow truck drivers on their docks.
Yep.
Worse than that, there's some of them that won't even allow the truck to remove it. They'll take a yard tractor and put it out in the yard and pick it up out there in the staging yard.
We have had that where our guys go into some yard at 11 o'clock at night. It's dark. They pick up a sealed trailer, the right one usually. They picked up the wrong one through the years. We had a guy drive all the way to Cincinnati, another guy drive all the way to New York with the wrong trailer.
Man.
But then
Right
you have a
vehicle with the
problem.
wrong trailer.
Again, dropping them because
Anyways,
you're. Go ahead.
double check everything, and but still, you know what? You open up that trailer when you get to the destination and the stuff is all over the place, and they say, well, when we loaded it was fine.
Right. This is where if they got cameras and stuff, or the ELD will show you if it turned over or hard stops. That's another advantage of that ELD information to fight that. But the problem with Chuck and Rico with this and cargo policies is most of them don't have a duty to defend in them. It's a quasi liability policy with property principles on it. And that's a crazy situation because what we're just explaining now is that you would want a defense in there, but you're talking about $100,000 or $250,000 worth of dollars. That's not the tort cases with $1 million or $2 million, and and they pay it, and they're not going to fight for that little extra. This is cargo is one of the most precarious policies you can write because none of them are standard. They're all different.
Yeah.
The trucker's
Right.
got to go and have a relationship with the agent and say, this is what I'm hauling. Tell me if I'm covered. Period.
Tom, why is there no standard here?
The general policy of inland marine, Chuck, and that's an animal thing. That's where you have your builder's risk and homeowner. I mean, not builder's risk, but manufacturer policy, output policy. It's just so different that there's just no regulatory basis. The states do not require the forms to be filed, and there's no state policing where you do for auto liability, mainly because the states require the policy to. I work with ISO, and there's a new motor carriers form that I helped write. In fact, I pointed out to them that, and they use when they explain, they use pickles and cucumbers as examples of the policy. So that's how far my father goes back at that. But the states oversee it. Yeah, the states oversee it, because they don't want something out there that penalizes their insurers, the customers on the highway. Well, a shipper should bear their own responsibility. It's not damaging the public, so there's no oversight in it like you do the liability policies from forms.
Yeah, that makes sense. Guys, I have to apologize. What happened was I was in my wife's office doing this, and I went to turn the light on. Somebody was staying here while we were gone. The light bulbs are burned out, and I was doing it in the dark by the light of the window. It's starting to get dark early, so I had to go into another room here. I apologize.
We'll appreciate that. We only got 4 or 5 more minutes here, Rico.
Yeah,
what else we need to talk about?
I was just getting ready to say, Tommy, let the people know where they can find you, or where they can track you down at before we get ready to get out of here. We get ready to try to bag this thing into a hole and wrap it up for this week.
It's just my name, Tommy at MCIEF, Motor Carriers Insurance Education Foundation, org. And I welcome questions. Anybody wants to just type me something, I'll give them suggestions of agents or talk to them about it. We don't have anything to sell. They talk to me, I'll give them an answer. if I can. I've answered a couple of people today on the telephone when things come up, but that's our job, just trying to share what I've learned for these zillion years, older than either one of you on this business part of it here.
Well, I'll tell you what, we definitely,
and,
I learned something tonight, and we're definitely,
and,
definitely eternally grateful for you taking time out to come and join us.
the last, let me add 1 second. Y'all need to go into your website with your PIN number. Truckers, listen to me. Go into SMS, and it says there, you can click on and put your DOT number and see what your new score will be under the new formula, and just see what it is, and see if there's an area you need to pay attention to, because what you do today is going to affect that score because it stays there for 2 years.
Yeah.
All right. Somebody wants to send an email. Let's go ahead. It's TOMMY@MCIEF, Motor Carriers Insurance Education Foundation, MCIEF.org.
All right. Well,
okay.
With that being said, Tommy, we appreciate you for taking the time out of your schedule to come on and join us live here this evening. We definitely, like I say, we are definitely eternally grateful. I've learned something. Hopefully everyone else in the audience has learned something, picked something up from this conversation as well. Chuck, let the folks know how they can get a hold of you.
Before I do that, I just want to say one thing to everybody out there. If you are buying truck insurance, for God's sakes, do not buy it from any insurance broker or company that does not specialize in truck insurance. Please. I spent enough time with Tommy through the years. We go, like, our families go back well over 60 years. And his group, MCIEF, is doing some great stuff in educating insurance agents and brokers. You've got to have one that knows what they're doing. I know you may get somebody that may be a few dollars cheaper that insures your barn and your motorcycle and your cows and your pigs and your chickens, but for God's sakes, don't trust him or her with insurance on your 18-wheeler, because I've seen it can be a disaster.
Right.
So, Tommy, keep doing this great work you're doing. If anybody needs me for anything, I'm always here to help. I'm back in the groove. I was away. I took a long, long holiday with my wife, which is another story, but was phenomenal. And we were gone for almost a month. So we are back, and you can reach me on my email. My new email is chucksnow280@outlook.com. Send me an email, put your phone number on it. Anything I can do to help you or any of our listeners, I will certainly be there for you. And with that, Rico, I'll let you back her in a hole for another week.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, once again, we thank you guys for taking time out to be with us. You could have been anywhere else in the world, but you took a little time to hang out with us here on the Rates and Lanes podcast, and we're always eternally grateful for you doing so. If you would do us a favor, tell a friend to tell a friend to check out the show. Send them a link, share the show with them. Ask them to subscribe. Ask them to like. You can always, even in the old video, you can always go in there and type a question. We'll get a notification if you got a question about an old show that you see on YouTube or anything like that. We'll get a notification, and we'll try to make sure that we come back and address a question or two if we get the notification to come back and look at it. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate you again. Until same time, same place next week. God bless you and good night. Keep it in between the mustard and the mayonnaise, and we'll talk at you same time, same place next week.
Catch you on the flip-flop.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.